Alright guys, let's get started. So last lecture we went over kind of like the high level of networking. So here we'll actually teach you the code on how to do networking. So before we do that, some announcements. A3 midpoint is due tonight. So please check the assignment page on how to submit it. It should be in like a green text bubble. And if you need feedback, make an ed post or come to OH. Stress on OH. We'd love for you guys to come and actually give you one-on-one feedback. And also, if you haven't submitted in either A1 or A2 or are still enrolled, please talk to us after lecture. And for the midpoint, it's just going to be completion. So as long as you follow the instructions, you'll get full credit. So yeah, a little recap. So an HTTP request is used to communicate between the client and server. And remember, client is us. We're using the endpoints, the backend endpoints, and the server is the actual backend. So today we'll only look at get and post requests. I know Jay mentioned options, but we'll probably never touch that. Remember, we use JSON to communicate between front end and back end. It's sort of the language that we use to bridge that gap. And we use callbacks when making network requests so that we can be notified when the network request is complete. And also conform your structs to codable to allow for encoding and decoding to or from JSON. So yep, that was the high level. And today we're going to be talking about Alamo Fire, which is going to be how we mostly make requests. So it's a networking library written in Swift, and it's built on top of URL session, but just uses a lot of makes it easier in terms of syntax. So basically it's just a wrapper. And so common use cases include fetching a JSON from an API, post some data to an endpoint, post request, fetching getter request, download an image from a URL, and authentication with a REST API. We're going to go over this concept called a network manager, which is a way how we actually implement networking functions. So here you see we define a class called network manager in order to store the functions primarily used for our Alamo network calls, Alamo Fire network calls. So in the class network manager, we make different functions for each backend request that we use. Then call these functions in our view controller. So this network manager is a shared singleton instance that we use throughout the rest of the app. And you're going to see this is like inside the class, we're going to define this static variable called shared, and that's going to be the singleton instance. And so with the principle of like singleton, there's only going to be one instance throughout the entire app. So whenever you want to access the singleton, you just do network manager.shared, remember OOP, and static indicates that this variable belongs to the class itself rather than like an instance of the class. So that means you can use this without having to instantiate like network manager somewhere. So you can just call network manager without the parentheses and just use dot. And we're going to go over that later. So first, we'll go over get requests, and I'll hand it over to Jay for our demo.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna open terminal. Same thing every time. So open a new terminal. Oh, it's on the screen. So you want to CD, navigate into the folder that we use for the demos. So for me, it's in this app dev folder and course demo. So I just drag the folder into the terminal. It automatically pastes the route to this folder. So I enter. Now it's in the course demo folder. Then we want to clone the repository. So I'm gonna run git clone. I'm gonna use the second one because the first one doesn't work for me for some reason. Git clone. Now ls, we can see that it's been cloned into this folder. So we're gonna cd into this folder, lecture 7. I'm gonna tab so it autofills, and open X, ls, and open lecture 7 dot xcode project. Okay. All right. So you see here we have a model called member, and right now it's using dummy data that we've hard coded, but you can see that the member model has a name, subteam, and position. And then in view controller, we have set up the view already. So what we want to do right now is we want to make a group called networking. This is where our networking class is going to be stored at. And then we want to make a file, a new empty file called network manager .swift. Okay. As you can see, the package dependency over here, we already imported Alumnifier. Usually if it's not imported, what you want to do is you want to right click on the project and then click on add package dependency. And then on Google you can search up Alumnifier and then go into the GitHub and then copy and paste the GitHub link into here and then press add package, but it's already been set up for us, so we're not going to do that. And then here we want to import the dependency into this file, import Alumnifier, and then we import foundation as always, and then class network manager. And as we mentioned, we're gonna have a shared singleton instance. Instance called static let shared equals network manager, and then we're gonna make a private init. I'm not gonna put anything in here for now. And then we want to make a network manager. Okay, I spelled it wrong over here.
Manager.
Yeah. Yeah, so this has to match the name of the class. And then we want to make a function called fetch roster. So let's write the document for that. Mark request. So under this mark, we're gonna put all of our function for our request. We're gonna have this demo. We're gonna have fetch roster and then posts. Fetch roster, we're gonna fetch all of the members from backend, and post, we're just gonna post one member to the backend. So let's work on fetch roster. Generally good practice to have like documentary for every function that you make, so people who are reading your code knows what this code is doing. So we're gonna write fetch the entire roster from the backend, and then define the function func fetch roster. Remember we have completion handler, and it has escaping member, and it returns the type void because this completion handler, it just runs the function and it doesn't return anything. Now, can someone tell me what completion handler does and what escaping does from last lecture?
Did we cover that?
Yeah, we went over that.
Very tricky.
Yeah, this is one of the more complicated things. Does anyone know?
Any guess? Do we have candy?
Yeah, we have candies. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Oh no, this is about to take it. So I left it out. It's candy, guys. Dopamine.
Alright, just
Okay.
answer it.
Yeah,
Here's
so
candy.
so completion, so escaping, it allows the completion handler to exit, to escape the scope of this function. So remember when you make a request, it runs asynchronously in the background, and then remember the analogy that we make for when you have to pick up a package and then you ask your friend to pick up the package for you. because you have to do something else. And then your friend wait for the package to arrive instead of your friend wait for the package to arrive while moving on with his life instead of waiting in front of the door for the package. And then once the package arrives, your friend delivers it to your parent. So the completion handler basically notifies your program where you call this function that the networking request has been completed, and then it runs that completion function that you have defined in the program that called the fetch roster. Does that make sense? It's a little loopy. Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah. I think, like you said, they run functions run sequentially, right?
Yeah.
So it's like instead of it starting back at the top, like it goes to that function. Is that?
Yeah. So as soon as you run the function completes. The whole function gets finished running. So this is what escaping allows it to do is like it allows the completion function to escape the scope of the function. So then the function dies, but then the completion handler is still there. Yeah. So that's completion handling and escaping. Let's continue the function. We're gonna specify the endpoint. Where do I get the link for the endpoint? I think. Okay.
It's somewhere there. Just write it.
Okay.
Here.
All right. Okay, let endpoint goes to. I might type something in wrong here, but it's very long. So iOS
course
dash backend .cornell.app.dev.com/API/members. Okay.
Perfect.
So this is the endpoint. Remember when we used
Can we make it
Postman?
bigger?
Oh yeah, sorry. Remember when we used Postman to kind of do the demo on GET requests and POST requests, and we use an endpoint? So this endpoint allows us to. It's a link that we use to retrieve data and send data to backend. Okay. And remember that we have the JSON format, so we want to create a decoder to decode the JSON into something that our program is able to read. So let decoder equals to JSON decoder. And then afterward, we want to create the request. So create the request. Alumifier, we're gonna use the package. This is a alumifier from package, and then we want to use request function, and we send in the endpoint that we defined earlier, and then method. Our method is get, and then we want to validate.
Validate.
Oh. And response decodable of member dot self, and then decoder, we use the decoder that we have defined. So this is basically saying that the response from the backend, it sends back an array of members, and then we're going to use our decoder that we defined over here to decode this response. Okay, member in. So now we're going to handle the response. So there's two cases for the response. The request is either successful or failure. Who remembers the code for success? Yes, good job. And then the failure, 2xx, yeah. So the failure is like 4xx and 5xx, right? And 4xx indicate that on your end you have to fix something. 5xx indicate that there's something wrong with backend. So switch response that result. What is this saying? Class requires member.
Yeah, because member.
Oh right.
Model.
Yeah. So Right, we'll fix that in a bit. So dot case dot success. So if it's successful, we have the members returned to us. So member, and then print successfully fetched members dot count members. So this line is for like debugging purposes. We want to see how many members were returned. It's not going to show up on the app, but it's going to show up in the log when we run in the console log when we run the simulator. So second case is that failure error, print error in network manager. So sometimes we want to be precise. Actually, like most of the time we want to be precise with like where this error happens, so it's easier for us to debug. Localized description. Okay.
Oh, should this member?
Yeah. So what happened right here?
Oh, no.
Oh.
This should be that.
All right. So and then like remember for us to be able to decode the model, we have to conform it to decodable or encodable. And for our case, we're going to use codable because we eventually have to encode as well. Although this function that we just wrote up was only for decoding. Okay. Okay, now we're going to go into, oh yeah, I forgot to call the completion handler. Members. All right. Now going back to, now we want to go to view controller and then call this function. In view controller, we have this networking section. But we want to make a private function, get roster, and call it in view.load. So private func fetch roster network manager dot share dot fetch roster weak self. Here we will use the weak self because we don't want any memory leak. Members and guard let self equals to self dot self else self, and then self dot members equals to members. So right here we can't do that because we have our members use a dummy variable. So we will change that in a bit after we finish writing this code. But right here we want to perform the UI update on the main queue. Perform UI update on main queue. So we're going to use dispatch queue dot main dot async, and then self dot table view dot reload data. So when we do some UI update, we want to put in the main thread since it should be the top priority, so that your app doesn't freeze. And then so right here, self.members equals to members. Notice how we use the dummy data for our members, so we want to change that. So our members should be a type of string array, or members array, and then equals empty array. I think that's it, right? Yeah. Let's run this. Yeah, let's run this program and start the simulator. Yeah.
So any questions while we wait for it to load? Let's see.
Oh, what? Didn't load. Oh, I forgot to call the fetch roster and view did load. let's call this function get roster actually, because um, the network manager is also called fetch roster, so this avoids some confusion. Okay. All right.
Nice. There's a lot of
Um,
Caitlin's.
Yeah. I don't know who was testing what, Caitlin. But yeah, so
If it
that
worked,
was, yeah. So that's how it works. So what we did was we created class network manager, and then we defined a share singleton instance. That's why we're able to call network manager share fetch roster here. It's because it is a share singleton instance, and we use static so that we don't have to instantiate it anywhere else in the program. We can just use it. And then we made the function fetch roster, which defined the logic of fetching from the backend. All right, why is this? Oh, it's already formatted. So notice that in console, after we fetch, it printed successfully fetched 53 members. So we know that like there's 53 rows over here. All right. Now let's move on to post requests. Can you open the? All right. Okay. So in networking, we have a function called fetch roster. So for post request, we want to make another function to post to the backend, to post to this roster that is stored in the backend. So we want to make a function add to roster. Okay. Member of type member, and completion escaping. Right here it's only gonna take one object, so we're not gonna use array here, and then void because it does not return anything. Okay. Oh, why is it? Okay. Remember to create the documentation for this function. So documentation for this function, we are gonna add a new member to the roster, and we do have a parameter which is member. Okay. All right, let's create this function.
It's the same route.
Yeah, so we're gonna use the same route. Remember in Postman when we use the route and then we have to make a get and post request? In this case, our endpoint is the same, but it's not always the same. Like sometimes you have to add like slash create and stuff like that, like when we showed in the demo. But in this case, we're just gonna use the endpoint, the same endpoint, and then when we make the request, we specify the method either we're getting or we're posting. So since we're gonna use the same endpoint, we're gonna move it into our property so that we can reuse it. So let's make a private variable, private let endpoint equals to this, and so we can delete this, and we don't need to use this too. And then we're gonna make a decoder equals JSON decoder. Notice how it's the same code again, so we're just gonna move it up to the property of the class, private let decoder equals to JSON decoder. Can someone take a guess of why we need a decoder for add roster as well? Like we're just posting, why do we have to decode anything?
It's tricky.
Right, Asin.
Okay, yeah. The reason why is because remember we talked about callbacks. So once this succeeds at posting, we're actually gonna get back the same member that we posted. Sort of like a handshake. Hey, the post actually worked. Here's what we added to the roster.
Nice. Okay, so now we're going to define the request body. So we need to make a parameter. Parameters equals to, let's look back to the model. So we have we have a name, subteam, and position, and they're all type string. So name, remember, and for the JSON format, it's they're all type string for key values. So member dot name subteam member dot subteam, and then position member dot position. All right. Now we have completed defining the request body. We can now make the request. AF dot request endpoint. Right here, we're using the same endpoint. That's why we moved it to the property, and the method will be dot post because we're posting to the roster that's stored in backend, and then parameters. And then encoding, we are going to use encoding JSON encoding default. All right, and then now we're going to validate, and that response decodable. So it's essentially like pretty similar code from the get, right? Member.self decoder, we have a decoder, and then response in here we handle the response. So case response dot result, case dot, oh sorry, this is a switch, case dot success. Is it 2C?
Okay. 2C.
And then let member print successfully added member slash member dot name, because it's just one member, right? And then case dot failure. Okay, let error print error in network manager dot add to roster localized. Okay. Yep. Okay, now remember the completion member. Yeah, this is fetch roster. Okay, so now we finished writing the request function to add to roster. I want to mention something though for the decoder. If we want to go like if we want to like decode a different format, or like sometimes we want to convert from like snake case, if we need to, we have to do like decoder.date decoding strategy dot ISO 8601, for example. This is the decoding strategy for decoding a date. Oops. Or now if we want to decode like from snake case, we use decoder dot key decoding strategy equals dot convert from snake case. Right. And you only want to use these like if you need it. Okay, now we're gonna go back to the view controller, and then we want to create a member object and add new member.
That's what there's a lot of complaints.
Yeah. Let newbie equals a member name. Let's call it. Let's use a different name this time. Who's a newbie? Zane. Subteam. iOS. Position. Go. All right. Yeah. And then now we call the network manager. Sure dot add to roster. And then member, remember it has a parameter member, and we're gonna pass newbie into it. And it's also a weak self, making a weak reference to prevent the data leak. Member in. Yeah, that's the description for it. Or let self. Or self.
Wait, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I have my daisy here.
Okay. All right. All right. So let's run this. Let's run this code and see what happens. Oh, actually. So if you notice, if we add, like, nothing happens. Actually, let's write one more line of code here. Print member dot position member dot name was added. All right.
Okay, just go.
All right. What's running?
It is the same thing.
Yeah. All right. Okay, it is right now. It's actually added because like the only time that we load the new data is when we open the app. But if you press this, nothing's gonna happen. But then like in our log, we can see that we added Gozane was added. But I guess another way that you can see without having to like rerun the simulator every time is like you can delete the background process of the app and then open it again, then you see it. Because when you open the app, right here, every time in view did every time you open up the app, like it get the roster, and in get roster, it calls this like network manager fetch roster and then reload the data, right? So we want to fix that so that we don't have to close the app every time we want to. We want to like we add someone's, and then we want to see the updated result. So one way to get the new data is to close the app. Last lecture we mentioned the other way. Does anyone remember? Did we talk about it last lecture?
I don't know. Regardless, you do this all the time.
Yeah.
Think about like in your Instagram feed, you want to reload your feed.
Yeah.
what do you do? Right.
You look like you have an answer. Yes, yeah, you
Yeah, you
refresh it.
refresh it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so now that brings us our third demo, refreshing. We're gonna ask Scroll to refresh. Alright. So this is we only need to do stuff in the view controller. So instead of table view, wait, yeah. Well, actually, we want to define, yeah. We want to define refresh control first. UI refresh control. And then we will add it to the setup table view. So and then table view has the refresh control but we want to set it to the refresh control that we have set that we have defined. Goes to refresh control.
So the only thing different from the default one is that we added a target function so that when you actually scroll up and refresh, it calls that function get roster.
Yeah. What's wrong here? Oh, we also want to make the get roster an object C function so that it can be added into object. We want to give the macro object so it can be used here.
Yeah. It's just like a convention, like
Yeah.
a necessary thing. You just have to put it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That should be simple.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's run the program and see the change in the simulator. I think I'm just gonna delete this line, bro.
You're making an error. All right. So we want to. So right now we have 3. Let's add 2 more. 1, 2, 1. Refresh. So it's not gonna stop refreshing because we never called it let it stop, right? But we already have the new data, so what we want to add here is like we want to stop the refresh here. Oh, what the heck? So self.refresh control end refresh. Yeah. So like when we refresh, it called the get roster function, but then like it just reload the data, but then the program doesn't automatically tell this refresh thing to stop loading, but we still get the new data. So if you're fine with your program looking like this, then that's fine. It's bad user experience.
Yeah. And then okay, let's count how many we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 Zanes, and we want to add it. Let's add 2 more, so now we have 7. You know what? Let's just like keep adding so we don't have to count it. Okay, and then like now we refresh it, like it ends refreshing, right? So we're gonna see like a bunch of Zanes.
No.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, we might have to clean this sometime. But yeah, that's it for the demo today. That concludes the demo. So you learn how to make a network manager class and set up the function to fetch from backend, and then set up the function to add to backend. And then you learn how to apply it to a view controller. Okay, let's end it.
Any questions before we move on? Yeah.
Is the refresh like a default icon, or can you change that?
Yeah, you can define a custom one. Personally, I have not done that before, but there are ways to do it. I'm pretty sure there's like you can define the actual like animation that plays
Yeah.
and change that.
Yeah, it's usually like you
Setting
just have to
up.
extend it and then write like extension for it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. What's next? Kahoot. Attendance. Yay. Host life.
Is that the updated one?
Yeah. I think I have the. Wait, did you also make one?
No, I made some changes.
Oh, really?
Wait, do you want to refresh it?
Wait, what do you
I
mean?
don't think it's refreshed.
What?
Unsaved. What?
Wait.
Did I mess something up?
Wait, sorry guys. Just give us a second. Wait, I also just updated like a couple hours earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, where do I go?
Library, folders, your folders. Open it.
Unsave changes. How do I save it?
Just
Oh.
press save. Yeah.
Oops.
All right.
Okay. Sorry, forgot to save stuff. So.
Okay.